Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. It's a podcast about femur bones and social media and different colours. My name is Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
And this week, I like that, it's a podcast about different colours. This week we're going to ask and answer the question, what if everybody got paid the same? What would happen? Because I saw an interesting passage in David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs where he sort of like lists out the different arguments, the different sort of ways people think about it. So we can go through that. So I think that would be good. And then, yeah, just what would be the problem with that, for God's sake?
For goodness sake.
Any
Oh, sorry, I was reading the thing. Anything to add to that, Ivanka? Not really. I look forward to discussing it. That's all I have to say.
Kind regards, Ivanka Magic.
Best.
How's
Ivanka.
Best regards. Cheers, Michael.
Thank you.
Do you ever write an email and you end it with thank you, and then I started with thank you, so now I've got to go and change the first sentence to not be thank you, and then I'll say thanks at the end, and then that gets me out of that conundrum?
I don't. I leave it, and then I put thanks again.
Life hack. Hashtag life hacks with Michael and Ivanka. So what's going on? I see. How's the coffee that you just made yourself?
I didn't make myself because the coffee machine's gone off. I went downstairs and the coffee machine is on a timer and it's been timed off. So I switched it on, so I'll be able to make a coffee when I come back.
Right. Well, you should use instant coffee like me. Oh, it's really bad for the environment. Actually, coffee granules. Someone said to me yesterday when I was like, I just drink instant coffee now because I'm not a slave.
I don't. I want proper coffee.
Mine's
I don't care about the environment. I worry about. I don't worry about the environment.
Ivanka
when it comes
Magic
to coffee.
does not care about the environment. You heard it here first. Ivanka, what is it about the environment that you don't care about it? I would have thought there's nothing more natural than coffee beans that you grind up yourself.
Don't know.
Surely, I don't know what the hell they do to make instant. All I know is there's a lot of fetishization of these addictive drugs sometimes, isn't there? I only drink coffee that's been eaten by a cat. That's a real thing.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, how are you getting on? What do you want to talk about? Do you want to sort of say anything that's happened recently?
Instead of my coffee, I've got a glass of pomegranate juice from my very own pomegranate trees. Organically farmed in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mm-hmm.
And shipped by land.
Shipped by land. Anyway, yeah.
Is it horrible?
No. Is it horrible? It's delicious.
Tell us about your dreams and your children, Ivanka.
Sorry, tell me what?
Tell us about your dreams and your child. And maybe a work anecdote.
Let me tell you. This could be a funny story or not, depends on who's listening. But I took my child to my father's grave this week.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, that's deep and sad.
You said it was the anniversary, right?
Well, it is, yeah. It was the anniversary, which is kind of, I don't really celebrate it, but then I remember it every so often. Celebrate. Anyway, I don't really recognise it very often. But then I was out we had to go and pick the van up because it had to be MOT'd. And we were driving back and I said to my daughter, would you like to go to the place where we can go and talk to my daddy who has died? I had to introduce a graveyard. I was like, let's go. There's this place, it's called a graveyard. And I didn't want to say that's where all the dead bodies are buried. So I said, that's where people put up, a little place where you can go and visit and talk to people that have died. So she's like, yeah, okay. So off we went. And so she arrives at the grave. And because my father was like not very into celebrating death and all these things, he has an extremely simple cross on his grave that just says his name. And there's all these stones. So she walks over and I was like, you got to speak Croatian to him. And she was like, yeah, I don't want to. So I was like, yeah, but you really should. And she sort of went, okay. Anyway, she said hello. And then she walked around going, well, who's this person? And I was like, Derek and Maury. She's like, and then she started completely, with no prompt from me, hugging all the gravestones and going,
right.
I love you. And then going to the next one and going, I love you. It's really sweet. And it was like really, well, I don't know where she got it from, but I mean, she does love people.
Literally embracing death.
Literally embracing gravestones. And then going, but Mummy, I need to talk to all of these people. There are thousands of them. And I was like, yeah, but they've got people who love them who come to visit them. Okay, so anyway. And then that was an interesting little episode in our lives. Surprisingly amusing for something that I've taken her only once before. It's not something I do very frequently. I took her once before when she was very little and I found it a bit much. But this time I was like, yeah, sure, listen, have you seen what you've, this is your granddaughter. She's a bit of a mentalist, but very nice. So
I have no rituals in relation to my dead mother. And I'm starting to suddenly think maybe I should, I think it's that thing of talking to someone.
Yeah.
So that all this talk of gravestones and actually, dead parents does segue quite nicely into Avengers Endgame and the Game of Thrones. we recorded this the week after this, but it's going to come out afterwards. But I saw Avengers Endgame. Have you seen it? I'm guessing not. No. I saw the Game of Thrones. It's been the culmination of 10 seasons of Game of Thrones and 21 Marvel movies in like the space of 2 days. And it's like, okay, that was good. Do I need to start another one of those? I don't even know if anything like that exists, but it is just unbelievable what they can put on screens these days. Sometimes I come away from these Marvel films going, I wish I could be part of something like that, creating something like that. But then, I don't know, I think it would be like working for a company of thousands and thousands of people. So I don't know if that's not the sort of job I like. So,
maybe we should make a movie.
Well, I'm working on one, but it's certainly not going to be at a Marvel scale. The smart thing they did, I think, was that there's probably this thing of, to make a big budget action movie in Hollywood, traditionally you have to prove, it's like anything, you have to show that you've got experience making a big budget action movie in order to get the job. Whereas Marvel went, no, we can take care of all that stuff, all the action and the CGI and all that business. We just want a filmmaker that can tell a story really well and can do characterization and can, do the storytelling part of it really well. And we'll take, because all that big budget VFX stuff, that's not the hard bit. In a way, it's the bit that takes a lot of money, but anyone, you can just get in any 1,000 CGI animators and do it. Whereas, and just, some experts in how do we make a rig that lets someone jump through a thing, but you can try again the more it's VFX. But what you can't do is give a single director, or in this case, a pair of directors, just let them kind of carry through the through line, because that's what it's about. I'm very interested in filmmaking. I don't know that I will ever get a chance to try it or how I imagine that would ever do it, but I am very interested in it and I get very excited about these things.
I watched Aquaman recently.
Oh God, I didn't get through it. I couldn't get through it.
Well, we concluded that, Nick went to bed, fell asleep.
Yeah.
And I stayed up watching it with my cousin, mostly because we were chatting at the same time.
Yeah.
And we concluded that basically there's at least one element of the storyline that it didn't need. It just had one too many little build up. Just if they'd have chopped one story out, it would have been far more fathomable. Not fathomable, enjoyable. It was just a bit boring. But
Well,
that
this is what
guy's
happens
really
when-
hot, so that kept me amused.
This is the other way of trying to do it that just doesn't pay off. The story was just non-existent.
No, there
It
was
just
no
didn't make
story.
any
That
sense.
was the problem.
Tone was all over the place. Everything was just like, and all these DC films. It's like, anyway. I watched a lot of these YouTube channels and seem to pay a lot of attention to this stuff.
I also watched Mary
chalk
Poppins,
it
the
up to-
new Mary Poppins this week.
Oh.
It's a very odd style for a 2019 movie, or 2018 or whatever it was, but it was very watchable. The difference between the original and this one, and what I think makes it annoying is not annoying. The only criticism to level at it is the fact that the songs are harder. They're a bit more complicated. So instead of like a spoonful of sugar, and all that kind of stuff that you can pick up really quickly and understand the words, they were like, the music was a bit too clever. And clever, I don't know if that's the word, but it like had raps in it. So, and that Lin Miranda, whatever his name is, look at me remembering someone's name. I remembered it because he was also involved in the music making for Moana. Okay. And Moana has some great music in it, but it also has a few too many instrumental scores.
Right.
Because
I see.
The
original Mary Poppins, did you know, was partly it was a technological advantage that Disney had, and they had this process for doing the green screen stuff that no one else had for a long time.
Wow.
And they made a lot of these films doing all this kind of like compositing that no one else had the technology to do.
But I mean, this new one is a bit like, they've got kind of that old school stuff. Probably done slightly differently, but I mean, we enjoy. I mean, look, these children's movies, not all of them are going to blow you away, but we'd concluded that it was very watchable. Though Nick had a few naps, I watched it all.
Shall we start by looking through David Graeber's bit of his book? Well, let's just find it. The bit that I sent you the other day was...
Do you need to remind us that
I'm
we're
gonna read
talking
it.
about what if everyone got paid the same?
If you just tuned in, we're talking about this week, what if everybody got paid the same? So this is the moral philosopher G.A. Cohen argued that a case could be made for equality of income for all members of society based on the following logic. Or at least this is my own bastardized summary. Why, he begins, might one pay certain people more than others? Normally the justification is that some produce more or benefit society more than others, but then we must ask why they do so. So that's the setup, and then we've got 6 things. So I guess we read a paragraph, then let's see what we think about it. So 1, if some people are more talented than others, for example, they have a beautiful singing voice or a comic genius or a math whiz, we say they are gifted. If someone has already received a benefit, a gift, then it makes no sense to give them an additional benefit, more money, for that reason. Should you get paid more for being talented?
It's interesting, isn't it? I did think just before you started reading that we should maybe say what our starting position is. And I'm personally, I'm on the. I don't know. I think if everybody got paid the same, that would be wonderful. Yes.
If everybody.
Well, if everybody had the same amount of money, is that the same thing?
Well, the sticking point for me is always the age. So what? Someone's going to come straight out as an 18-year-old and suddenly get the same salary as someone that's been around for 30 years in the work. Someone that's been around for 50 years. Does that stack up? But do you need the experience to build up before you start? Like that. It's hard to kind of get away from that dynamic for me. So I don't know what the thing is there.
My dad used to have this quote where he said, apparently he always had these sayings. One was, even a calf, if it went to university for 4 years, would become a bull. Not necessarily picking up any knowledge along the way. So age doesn't necessarily equal knowledge, or betterness. But yes, okay.
Well, and then there is the case for, okay, well, let them invest some capital in their future. So why limit their ability to sort of invest capital in what their decisions are going to be? So, yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily a case against.
So this idea that if you you already have a gift.
Yeah, why should you get money as well?
The example of this is, for me, I sometimes I often think about myself as lucky because of some of my innate abilities. I wouldn't say I'm particularly talented in any particular area, but I am of a certain level of intelligence, which means that I can do things that some people find some things easy that some people don't. So despite actually having some sort of dramas and traumas in my life and not having any privilege in terms of money in my background, I have this privilege of being healthy and capable and those kind of things. Yeah. So somebody who is less gifted in that regard, but doing, why? So therefore never able, because, do you remember I quoted my sister at one point talking about this thing about achievement in context. So if you're in care and you're applying to university, they can measure you on achievement in the context of where you are. So because I still think like the thing that comes up is the sort of laziness element. And even with your graduates, some work hard to become more wise and some don't. And some people who are old and lazy and belligerent. So I kind of feel like if you are achieving or, doing what you should be doing in the context of what you're tasked with or what you're able to do, then be paid the same money. So you get graded on, your wage is set on your achievement in context measure. So if you're more talented, of course you're going to be better at singing. So obviously I would never be paid to sing. Nobody would ever do such a thing. But, given the or I don't know, what the comic genius maths is. I don't know if do you know what I mean? So if you're delivering 8 out of 10 of your potential achievement in the context of your ability, then you get the 8 out of 10 wages. But if you're doing 1 out of 10 because you're not doing enough, then maybe you get, so that could be whether you're cleaning the streets, because anyway.
So here's I mean, I don't know that this helps the conversation, but like the first thing what I immediately come to is the myth of talent there, and this idea that anyone's got some innate thing. It's like talent is nothing without work. And I goes to sort of Malcolm Gladwell, this sort of myth that these people are geniuses, or think no, they just were able to put 10,000 hours into something and get really good at it. And that is more a question of first love. What do you fall in love with? What do you get excited about? I've just seen my first sampling keyboard and it's blown my mind and it's all I want to think about now. Or like just seeing a piano and just going, that for me is love. Or seeing the computer and getting it to do something. It's like that for me is a moment of falling in love with a thing and going, okay, I want to know more about that. And then the second dimension of that is privilege, is, we've managed to scrimp and save and get a piano for the house and some piano lessons. So that there's the opportunity / privilege plus the interest. And I think those can explain 90% of what we call talent. Yeah. And even singing, no one gets to, and I have this conversation with my singing teacher. No one starts off with a beautiful singing voice, but they do it every day and they do it all the time from being a child. And then they have a better posture and then they have better breathing because they're singing all the time. And it's just the interest in it is what breeds the skill in it. A comic genius has to go and bomb 1,000 times before, has to die in front of these audiences in comedy clubs over and over again. Like no one is immune to that, because comedy is this thing where you've got to try out your jokes on people or you don't know, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of nerve and that kind of thing. And then math whiz, you've got to be interested in maths. You're not going to get good at that without thousands of hours of study. So, I'd say there is a myth to that whole idea of talent. And really, we need to be thinking more about opportunity. And the ways in which we can let people follow the things that they really fall in love with.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I constantly, I consider myself to have been very privileged to have had parents that were extremely engaged in talking to me about all sorts of things all the time. You know, like we talked about this, like maths tricks and maps and traveling and you know, like let's just look at things and talk about them. So yeah, I think that, which is what that creates the opportunity to have that interest. Yeah, because how can you be interested in the same way, like how can you love what you don't know? How can you be interested in something you've never heard of?
Yes, exactly. And then I just know that, you know, I mean, there is something innate to it, because otherwise all of my brothers and sisters might have been, you know, doing what I'm doing. But then maybe being the eldest brother and me being the one that can hog the computer is a factor in that. Like,
being the biggest.
Get off. Again, like Malcolm Gladwell, it's like the sports, you know, gifted sports people are people that tended to be a bit older in the school year because they're bigger. So, you know, there's those strange forces at work all the time. And the myth of genius, the myth of... there must be a bit to it. And certainly, like, you know, having the brains is very helpful. And that's hard to really call a nurture effect. But
we don't really know. Okay, so number one, we are okay.
And just to add to that, just the way I see someone, you can see people feeling like they have to work really, really hard, but because they're, I don't know, maybe not quite as seeing as clearly as they could be, that they do. And it's that poverty thing, like it makes you stupider.
Yeah.
Like it literally, you know, God, I forgot his name.
Hans Rosling, no, Bergman.
Rutger Bergman, saying, you know, like you measure IQ, if you believe in IQ, as some of those fascists still do, in the same way that talent springs from opportunity and privilege, like even intellectual faculties are affected by your level of opportunity and privilege, and not just from education, also just from the fact that your kind of perspective is so narrowed by the desperation of poverty. One of the reasons I sort of thought, well, maybe I should pivot on some things I was doing is, what is the thing that you can do that the fewest other people are able to do, and maybe focus on that in order to find that kind of, because I think what this first point is talking about is, why do we pay film stars so much? Why do we pay, like, why do these people get so much more than everyone else?
Yeah, or football stars. Yeah, because I was thinking about it in the context of jobs and work. It's starting from a position that actually affects very few people. Yeah. Wow. So that's kind of that's actually not the, you know, that's not where
really the point in general.
No, I don't feel. Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
All right. So, do you want to read two? Why not?
If number two, if some people work harder than others, it is usually impossible to establish the degree to which this is because they have a greater capacity for work, a gift again, he argues, and the degree to which it is because they choose to work harder. In the former case, it would again make no sense to reward them further for having an innate advantage over others.
So in the former one, you got a gift, so, and then the other one chose to work harder, therefore they should get. Does anyone choose to work harder? I mean, you can get sucked into something that you love doing, but then a lot of the time people are having to work more is just because they don't see any other way of getting by.
I mean, I think it's the work harder. It depends on the context of this working harder, I think, in terms of, so if there's two people doing exactly the same job and one of them just, I don't know, what you define, let's say you're...
Well, I've got an example of this. My first temp job, I had to copy some numbers from like a DOS shell into a Excel spreadsheet, which was on a shared drive. And there was this other temp doing the same thing. And I was going from the top, from the bottom, and she was going from the top. I was working up. And then I pretty much got to the top. And then it just transpired that she hadn't been saving. So basically I'd done all the work. She hadn't done anything.
And what was at stake here? Did you get paid the same, or did you both keep the job? What happened? Was it a competition?
Well, she went home, Well, she didn't stick around. I stuck around because, I clearly had a bit more aptitude for things.
Because because one could argue that for her to have made such a mistake, she hadn't been told what to do properly.
Yeah, that's probably, if you're not, and that could be a privilege. Yeah, I know our spreadsheet documents work. I can save it. All right, I have an internalized understanding of how computers work, which because I've been obsessed with them for 20 years or whatever, like 15 years.
Because I think it's like, this is, two people following the same piece of instructions aren't necessarily going to give the same output. And it's like, this work harder. I think this definition of working hard, because this also generates, I think the idea that some people work harder than others is used as a sort of, I think it's used badly in the workplace.
To pit people against each other.
It's like all those jobs where like places like LBI where people stay late and they work hard and they play hard and they blah. And it's like, no, actually it's 5 o'clock. You pay me till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever they got paid. And then now I'm going home because I've done the bit that you've agreed. I've worked hard while I was here. I've done what I needed to do. Now I'm going home. Yeah. I never particularly clock watched, because if I get into something, I don't mind it. But equally, am I working hard? And then there's people who, are just staying there dicking about, but looking like they've been there longer because they're not really, they're in no rush to go home, or they just want to look like they're working harder. So this idea of measuring, it's that thing you said, like the Bill Hicks, you get paid more than me. Why don't you pretend I'm working hard? It's like, so this idea of working harder, I think, is bullshit. I will use the phrase of the book.
So, and also sometimes I see people working really, really hard, but it's to fix
just getting
problems of their own creation, because
yeah.
Like,
and also
you are so like kind of like, work every second of the day, necking Red Bulls. It's like, that's not what it's about. Like, you've got to slow down, because you'll probably have to work a lot less. And because working hard, just kind of keeping your head down is only half the story. You've got to recover. Your brain's got to recover. You've got to come in and kind of come back to it. And the longer you stay up, the more mistakes you make. The harder you work, the longer you work. But then I think there's also this, like, the work hard words come in much more, I think, when it's like a manual labour type thing. Like, if I'm sweeping a street and you're sweeping a street, and I'm sort of like titivating it with my broom and you're sweeping it really hard, and you're really like pushing forward and moving faster, the question really is not, I think it's about sort of incentives and rewards. It's like, why are you brushing it so slowly, Ivanka? Why are you, it's actually, it could be because I'm paying more attention to detail and picking more bits up. It could be because I'm just thinking, do you know what? I'm going to enjoy myself today and just go nice and slowly, or my shoulder hurts, or I don't know. So I think those are the times when actually, if you're carrying bricks, I'm thinking of some of the jobs I've done, like in the family, like carrying bricks, because my dad's building a wall, and it's like I always ended up doing it because I could carry more faster, because I was bigger than my brother when we were little. Not anymore, but it's like, of course I'm going to do the help because I can get more done. But that's not, he wasn't punished because he was littler than me. He just got to go and do, he used to help my mum
this sounds very
Do you
traditional.
know, and it sort of makes sense. This only really makes sense in a world where everybody's doing the same job, and you sort of flow into the types of. You should need to. If we could let people flow into the sort of things that they enjoy doing and doing well, then it would. It's not like. Okay, it's not like there's only one job that needs to be done and everyone needs to compete to do that one job. Maybe it is.
I think it's interesting, this idea of getting paid the same. The hard work, because I did some brand values with a company quite recently, and they're a consultancy that works with lots of freelancers, and they've always been trying to work on a model to distribute the profit more, and it's like and then they had one model, but then people who didn't really contribute, so they would say didn't work as hard, that would be the phrase that they used, would end up with the same profit as people who worked harder. But what they were really saying was that people who were contributing to the making of the profit were getting the same as people who weren't really contributing. And that's that's
something to be said for like the reward being well, I mean, 30 more of my stuff made it in, so maybe next time you'll like, it doesn't all have to be about money. It can be about all these other factors. And the other thing, the thing that you made me remember, because I did listen to David Graeber sort of doing an hour talk on this subject this morning as well. I just did vaguely preparing on my way in.
Wow, tricky.
He was talking about, like, if you we've been talking about like this 15-hour work week since someone like first said it in the 30s, and how automation was going to kind of like mean that we would have more leisure time. And actually the way it's kind of like worked is more like there's more jobs that you don't do anything. So it's sort of working out in this weird way. But what he was saying about how would you enforce, like, everyone stops at 3 instead of 6 kind of thing. How do you change it from 9 to 5 to 9 to 3? How do you actually enforce that without some horrendous system of surveillance and monitoring? And like, how would you actually make that happen? From a state level, you couldn't really.
No. Plus different people work better at different times. They'll want to do the work thing. Because I think in this world of contributing, like, which is kind of what we've done with Restaurants Brighton now, is that when we're away, we're sharing the profits out equally, because it's like no one person, each person doing whatever they're doing, contributing whatever they're contributing, adds up. Like, I can't live in this house and earn a living if the road outside is full of rubbish. Every single person, there is no one person whose contribution is more or less valuable ultimately. And this is what actually like broke up my last musical collaboration, was that we've been working together, and I'd always been like, I've done enough of these to know that if you start trying to quantify musical contribution, it gets stupid. And like, they ask you to like say percent this person, this percent this person. And I'd always said, look, I think like this is 2 of us, 50%. Okay, you're doing the singing and some songwriting, and like, that's cool, but I'm bringing something you're not going to get anything else too. And I will be bringing in a lot more, that other stuff as well. And then it was a conversation like where I was like, well, producers usually get 18%, someone told me. And I was like, we're not doing this. That's not how I'm going to live. This is not how I'm doing this, because you start fucking around like that. Like, our values are just too different. If that's what you're going to say to me. So that was like, okay, well, sorry, we're not doing this. Bye. And it was something I was quite invested in, but it was like, sorry, I can't. And you're right, like that, it is really hard to measure things, especially like when you get into a creative sphere. But as you've even hinted at, like even bloody street sweeping, there's different qualities of street sweeping. And I think another thing that Graeber does talk about is like what the innate reward of work is one of the first things that excites children first is that they have an effect on the world, a predictable effect on the world. They move something and it happens, and they're overjoyed. And then sort of like evil psychologists will do experiments where, like, okay, if you kind of let a child experience that and then take away their ability to have an effect on the world, they just go catatonic. The depression that absolutely destroys them.
And so these jobs where it's like the jobs that are killing people are the ones where they're not affecting anything, and they can work as hard as they like, but it actually has no impact on anything they can possibly perceive. So, that's one of the worst things, is working really hard on something is utterly just not even pointless, just actually actively bad. I'm making people feel bad about themselves for a living, and it's really hard. Like, that's just not a good place to be. I feel like I've kind of conflated and merged a load of things here, but the point being, like, the reward of work is the effect that you're having. And it's so why should, and if people find the thing that they enjoy having the effect, then why should they get, how does money doesn't, and in the same way, getting paid more for something pointless doesn't make the work any more palatable. No. It's still day to day, that's your life, and it's shit, like, if it's not what you want to be doing. So I don't think people will there's no reason to think anyone's going to get lazy just because the money is the same. No. I know somebody who I worked with at I worked with her at the Labour Party, but she said her team previously, she just paid all the freelancers exactly the same regardless of what role they did, and she was upfront about that. That's it. Yeah. And I think in that way it's not it's actually very simple, and it takes out that political situation, because you do get a political situation in these things. When you know that somebody's earning a truckload more money than you, you're like, well, no, fuck you, you do it. You're supposed to be the smart one. Or like when you see they're not doing... Yeah. Or as you go. When you see someone not doing a good job, it makes it all the worse. Oh, you get so angry when you're like, how come you're earning £300 a day more than me a day, and you're doing fuck all? Though sometimes if they're earning the same and doing fuck all, that's irritating as well. In your recent experience, was the other person, do you think, doing it? What do you think the relationship between competence and like wanting money for something and I like think love and if you are doing the job just for the money, I think it's almost impossible to do a good job. And do you think this person was doing it just for the money? Or I think so. I think they wanted to be a consultant, and because that pays you this much money, and then you can do all these other things. And it's like, actually, like, it wasn't about I think that's part of the problem. It wasn't about doing a good job. So in the same way that, like, paying people... So I think that... Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this. It highlights that if you create... If it is unequal, then you create this artificial incentive for people to do jobs that they're not good at or interested in for the sole reason that they'll get paid more. Yes, exactly. He was doing the job because it pays more than other jobs, for sure. Well, I mean, I've been thinking about it. Like, I had all the way through university, I had cleaning jobs because I much preferred... I did Waitrose for a year while I was at sixth form on a Saturday, and I actually found that quite... I didn't really enjoy it very much. It's because some people are really horrible to you when you're on a checkout. And then I got cleaning jobs, and I didn't have to speak to the general public, which was nice. But it's really, cleaning is really satisfying. On the subject of, like going back to street sweeping or cleaning the road, because I do, but having a cleaning job, it's very nice to go in. I used to clean a school, and you go in and it's all messy, and then you leave and it all looks really nice and clean and tidy. Imagine how nice the world would be if everyone got paid the same and cleaners got paid the same as
Yeah, and they
whatever.
could just enjoy you just do cleaning.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
I bet you that kitchen. But would it be nice for the reason that now people that love cleaning are cleaning, right? And am I thinking that because our kitchen here skeeves me out pretty badly because there's someone else in this building. I told you, I just went at 10:30 in the morning. Someone had raw meat and they were doing some chicken. It was like, what? It's 10:30 in the morning. I just want to make a coffee, and but it's always a bit like grim in like the surfaces. And I noticed this morning that I don't think the cleaner does the kitchen surfaces, just does the floor and the things. It's like, would a vocational cleaner? Have we got a vocational cleaner? I don't know. Is she just like, you're not paying me enough for this? Is she like, I've only got X amount of time, so I've got to kind of like do X amount of work? Yeah, how does time come into this?
I think where we're privileged is in that we could earn a lot less than we do and still not be worrying about money in that base level. That's not strictly true of me because I've reduced the amount of time it takes me to earn the money that I need. But let's say if you're really on minimum, not even on a living wage, but on a minimum wage, and you're constantly worried about money and I've got to do this and I've got to get there and I've got to get the cheaper train or whatever it is. If you're constantly worried, I'm going to get the bus because it's cheaper, so it takes me longer to get there, and how can you do a good job? Really? Okay. Like if you're a cleaner, how can you, when you're constantly worried and on edge and I've got to rush there and pick up my kids, and then because if I'm late then I'll get penalised, because that's what your life is if you're not getting a living wage where you can just be function normally. There's a great video going around at the moment of a US senator, somebody, congresswoman, I don't know their titles as well as the British ones, but she's speaking to the CEO or president of JP Morgan Stanley, whatever they're called, and she's kind of doing you pay this person this much money, rent in this town costs this much, a car costs this much. I don't know if you've seen it. Anyway,
so when I tried to bring up the other week but couldn't remember who it was or what was involved, trying to get this banker to account for what you're going to do.
Yeah, you're so clever, and the thing that he wasn't saying was like, clearly I need to pay them more, but how can you, on the same subject as that thing that Rutger Bergman brings up, which is that your IQ level drops if you're worried about money.
Yeah.
How can you think creatively about, do you know what, if I just moved that there or did that, it would look loads better, or I could clean that or whatever. How can you do that if you're just beside yourself with concern all the time?
So I was gonna talk about like does if everyone's getting paid the same, does that just lead to an economy where the employers are trying to minimise the number of hours they've got to pay people for? So I think that inherent in this thought experiment, in this idea, is that everyone gets paid the same regardless of how many hours. I think it just needs to be you'll get paid the same, which makes it even harder to kind of get your head around. But if you're getting paid the same rate, but you can only get 2 hours a week work, then obviously it's not really solving the problem.
But some jobs just don't take as long. So why should I be at work when you're out playing football?
And I think people will find things that they want to do. And I think we have a certain amount that we'd like to work, so we'll find a way to do it, or we'll try and find a way. 3, even if it could be proved that some work harder than others purely out of choice, one would then have to establish whether they did so out of altruistic motives, that is, they produced more because they wished to benefit society, or out of selfish motives, because they sought a larger proportion for themselves. So we've sort of like taken as the baseline that people have to choose to work harder, which I don't know. But then why are they doing it? And like my thing on this, and what drives a lot of some of the projects that I've designed myself, are that there's no point trying to ask why someone's doing something.
No.
All that matters is what they do. Like some people, it doesn't matter if you're doing it to greenwash your company. You're still doing it. And we just have to look at how much.
I mean, going back to my recent example.
I learnt the word greenwash last week. Continue.
Going back to my recent example, there's a desire. I mean, what's he saying? It doesn't really matter. Like,
doesn't matter why.
It's hard. It's hard. It's like, okay, there's these altruistic motives. I think they're missing a motive, which is that the output is better. You know, okay, you could argue that, making a street cleaner is of benefit to society. I mean, making a street clean is of benefit to society. Making this street cleaner than the other street is really about your sense of satisfaction with the work you've done, isn't it?
Yeah, and maybe compliments. And who cares? Oh, yeah, someone thanks you for doing a good job. Like, why does it matter?
I don't think it matters.
Let's do 4. Do you want to take it?
Yeah, we've dismissed 3. 3, gone. In the former case, if they produced more because they were striving to increase social wealth, then giving them a disproportionate share of that wealth would contradict their purpose. It would only make moral sense to reward those driven by selfish motives. So if you're doing it because you want the project to be better, or because your project's going to benefit society, then you surely don't want more money, because
otherwise it cancels out your effect, because you're taking all the value that you've created. I don't really like these.
No, I think that's
striving to increase social wealth, because this idea of I don't know what this kind of predicate of social wealth, altruism. I mean, are we talking about? Is it about nurses? Like, is that what we're coming back to? Is that people that like to help other people in a real way should get paid more than people that are just doing stuff for themselves? Like, those jobs shouldn't exist. There'd be a lot fewer of those pointless jobs if all jobs got paid the same, because then you wouldn't be basing it on money. And most of those pointless jobs, or damaging jobs, are kind of attractive because of the money that you get paid.
I know we're just picking out a small section of a book, but I feel like all this needs to have the underpinning of being paid well. So everybody should be paid the same. Yeah. Well, it's like, because let's take the nurse or doctor example. Why does a doctor get paid more than a nurse? That goes to, because frankly, one cannot be successful without the other. They are incredibly interdependent as far as I can establish. But none of those people should be struggling. No, I mean, nobody should be worrying about money.
No.
By all means,
stupid.
Worry about whether or not you can afford a Louis Vuitton handbag because you don't need it.
But a lot of those things are signifiers that I've got to prove to everyone that I get paid so much.
Yeah.
And maybe if you took that out of the equation, then you took it out of the equation, then you'd get a lot of less pointless. I don't know.
This is part of our target on TAT. Mm-hmm.
Target on TAT. Paint a target on TAT. But this is the other end of TAT. This is like massively expensive TAT.
Yeah.
Is it still TAT? But it's like, if it's showy stuff, like, is that as much of a problem? Is maybe as much of a problem as, because it's still, I can only wear this £5,000 dress once kind of situation, isn't it? It's like
single use.
It's all about showing how much money you've got. Look at my look at my watch that has to cost a minimum of £10,000 for me to be taken seriously in my job, and I have to have 10 of them because otherwise people will know that I'm not getting paid that much. Take that out of the equation. I don't know if the high end TAT is quite the same volume of landfill as the
the store. Yes, there's lots of lots of destroying stuff that doesn't sell because you don't want it available cheaply. There's lots of poorly treated staff. There's lots of polluting of rivers. It's same.
Good.
It's same.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that I have pointed that out then.
Okay then.
Shall we do 5? 5 Since human motives are generally shifting and confused, one cannot simply divide the workforce into egoists and altruists. Is he kind of dividing up people? Is he saying that some people would be lazy about not working as hard? Or no, but it's egoists versus altruists. I feel like we've gone down a line here. I thought this looked good because it had some bullet points, but I don't know if this is any good.
Well, I think what he's saying is if I'm working hard because I want to look good versus I'm working hard because now he's moved on to say, like, these are speaking only of the people that work hard. Am I working hard because I want to look good, or am I working hard because I want the world to be a better place, or because I care? Like, am I a nurse, or am I a fashion designer, or a banker? I think that's good. Nurse or banker. Therefore, so the banker would be in the egoists department in his definition, and our nurse would fall in the altruists.
I mean, there's ego. There's things that are nice for the ego either way, I think.
Oh, absolutely. But this
job,
is my
right.
Yeah.
So let me finish reading it. One is, if we divide them up, if we realise that we can't divide it up, then one is left with the choice of either rewarding everyone who makes a greater efforts or not doing so. So either option means that people's intentions will be frustrated. Altruists will be frustrated in their attempts to benefit society, while egoists will be frustrated in their attempts to benefit themselves. If one is forced to choose between one or the other, it makes better moral sense to frustrate the egoists. I think we can agree that that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree.
Why are we upsetting the... Why would we make the altruists' lives bad and the egoists' lives good?
Yes.
That's not fair, is it? Morally.
No, that is bad.
Let's skate into this conclusion, shall we?
Yeah.
With point 6 from Ivanka.
Oh, is that point? Okay. Point 6. Therefore, people should not be paid more or otherwise rewarded for greater effort or productivity at work.
Case closed. But everyone else should get paid. The baseline level needs to be high enough that everyone's cool.
No,
which is perfectly possible, money. Isn't it? Have you heard Bernie Sanders calling for Disney after the Avengers Endgame weekend, saying, well, this is your chance to kind of like give all of your employees a middle-class salary. Why don't you do that, Disney? I don't know how that's panned out. But, stop. Whereas the owner gets 175 times more than the median wage. Like, there's definitely enough wealth to divide up.
That's the thing. Like, give everybody that 50 grand a year, the 50 to 70 grand a year. Yeah. And then, if you're the owner of the company, here's another 100.
Yeah. Well, now my question is, like, how widely would a system like this have to be adopted for it to be sustainable? Or would it create, okay, well, I want to go and live in this country because I can get more money and jets, because I don't want to, for whatever reason, buy into this idea that some people maybe don't need jets.
Well, if we take that, I don't know how many people want more jets and more money, if there's enough of them to create that. But then they own the propaganda machines. I don't know. I mean, in terms of us normal folk, what aren't billionaires, I think we'd be quite up for that, surely.
We would certainly stand to benefit, but would it be like a tax haven situation where all the people that can actually make the change sort of like scurry off to tax havens so that they don't have to participate in this social experiment? But
let's take that Suma company, the one where everyone gets paid the same, apart from truck drivers. I can't remember why they're special, but apparently they are. But that whole town has become a nicer place to live, by all accounts. And it's
we
like...
know, yes, and we brought it up.
So
we bring it up, and that's the thing that convinced me that actually, despite my initial kind of, no, that doesn't sound right, reactions, is that when you multiply that by society, you start to get a nice place to be.
Yeah.
And what's the smallest? I mean, how small could you start? If I was starting a company with employees, I would definitely want to do paying the same to everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's a kind of it's just you got to. It makes, if you stop and think about it, it makes perfect sense. It doesn't mean that any person is less responsible than any. Like you still have your role and you still have the thing that you're supposed to do, but if everyone comes and does their bit, then we'll all take home exactly the same amount of money. I think that's cool.
And if you fuck up, you might get fired, but that's life.
Yeah. That is life. Yeah, it's not a safety net. It's not to say that you can do nothing. You still have your... And maybe that's the bit that we haven't brought up on the subject of who works harder and who works less hard. I think in a world, if you were paying everybody the same, you have to be very clear on what each person's responsibilities are, what each person has to do. So, like, if you're and I think we've all had managers like this, which is, look, I don't care what time you come in or what time you leave, but that project needs to be delivered on time. So, do it. So if you stroll in at 10, I haven't been clock watched at work for a very long time. But like in that, if we go back to the 2 street sweep, me sweeping one street really slowly and you doing it really fast and vigorously, it's actually... we're both going to get paid the same. Ivanka, it's probably going to take you longer to sweep the street, but as long as the street has no litter on it, I don't really care how you go about doing it, but both of you. But if my street or your street had loads of litter on it, then we could still be fired.
Well, perhaps, yeah. And if it takes out we've got to account for your time because time is money. If it did make it more about the kind of outputs, then it does sort of like take that. It does give people a bit more freedom and flexibility to get it done the way they want. And I think that we underestimate the force of meaning and satisfaction and feeling like you're doing something useful every day that would move people from a job that maybe was a bit too easy for them. Yeah. To something that was a bit more meaty, because it would give that's something we kind of move towards. We want to do something a bit more ambitious all the time, and like if money wasn't part of that, I don't think it would change. The fact that we'd want to try something bigger.
I mean, we all like learning, really.
Well, people play computer games for that reason, right? People, it gets harder and harder. You get more and more capable as you go through it, and that's you don't get paid for that. People pay for the privilege of working, learning some skill.
Yeah, that's true.
So, it's the biggest industry. It's the biggest entertainment industry. And imagine if we could bring the same instincts that fuel that to the workplace instead of the situation we've got at the moment. In fact, I think everyone should have to pay the same amount of money to work.
Yes. That is it. We have to pay to work.
Yes.
We have to use our universal basic income to pay for the privileged family job. No!
Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, come to granderpodcast.com. Subscribe wherever you're listening if you can. That would be wonderful. But hopefully that subscribe button does it for you. Let me know if it doesn't, because I am the webmaster as well as the editor.
You are the webmaster.
Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
Cool. And you can find me at youtube.com/user/Michael Forrest. You weren't expecting that, were you? What else can listeners that enjoy it maybe do? You don't have to do anything. But
you can just enjoy it. That's okay.
It's nice to express your love.
Yes.
What do you do with your love of this? Sorry.
With the love of this podcast, you buy less stuff. And you look after the environment and you change electricity suppliers. No, you write us some ratings and reviews, please. Email us and tell us that you like our podcast, or tweet at us, or all those kind of things.
You know what?
Yes,
I think
tell
you're
your
onto
friends.
something. I think you're onto something there.
What?
You know what to do if you like a podcast. We don't have to tell you. You're not stupid. If you like the podcast, recycle. And thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. Bye. 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 Bye.